Hello everyone and welcome to Fuse Room. I'm Alberto. This video is about OrangeClip by Schwabe Digital. Let's go. What is OrangeClip? It's a wave shaper / clipper. Where's the news in that? We got tons of those tools already. Why would we want one more? While you were watching your favorite influencers do their stuff and games and tricks, I was actually busy working with music, believe it or not. That happens. So I got a new commission for a video game soundtrack and I gotta write tons of sketches for it, so that the audio leads can then pick their favorites. So I'm working with my things, usual tools and habits and templates, and my good friend Ryan Schwabe calls me and says, Alberto, I've made a thing, and I think it sounds pretty dope. Do you want to try it out? And now it's part of pretty much all the sketches I've written for these projects so far. It made it through some of the ideas that were actually approved. Let's take a look at a track that I've worked on that has tons of it, see what it does, why I liked it, follow me. The main interface has nothing weird that we haven't seen in other clippers. It's just very well laid out. I love how flat and stylish these UIs are. There's an input meter and an output meter at the extremes, respectively left and right, of course. And then there's a slider for the input gain and the output gain. Now, this input gain will eventually hit a ceiling value, and that ceiling is represented by that white horizontal line, which reports obviously the level as well. So I can lower the ceiling or raise the input or do both things to make my sound hit the ceiling point. If you take a closer look at the central part of the interface, you'll notice that there's two dashed lines that are a little bit more pronounced. So that point, the crossing between those two lines, represents your ceiling point. But it doesn't mean that that is exactly the point at which you'll start affecting the gain structure of your sound or actually wave shaping your program material. This will be dictated by how you handle that orange knob. Now, if I go all the way counterclockwise, minus 51.8, you'll see how much of a soft clipping behavior I have, although the ceiling is still that crossover point, right? If I go 0, now I have a very hard knee, which we've been seeing in a lot of hard clippers, and it sounds obviously different. In between the minimum and maximum orange values for that knob, I guarantee you there is that one value that will place the sound in the mix exactly the way you want. So here we go with my first recommendation for why did it sound good to me. I've used it to place specific sounds of a busy mix in a specific point, and it will just handle the dynamic range in a way that is faster than compressors. I couldn't probably stay for a very long time on a lot of sketches, so I need practical solutions, but it sounds awesome, and we'll take a listen at that. Moving on with the controls, we got the wet and dry sliders. They can be linked together so they can move in opposite direction from each other. This will get you a balance really quickly if you want to do parallel injection. You can even solo them just to get a quick reference, and the both of them will go to your output gain structure. So when you move that output slider, the dry and wet combination will actually move together. So this is just moving the balance of the dry-wet signals. And I think this is nice because once you get that mojo going, you want to place it somewhere specific, and so the output just affects the final outcome of the sound processor. Speaking of link sliders, there's another one here on top that will link your input and output sliders so that you can gain up or down the input, and the other one will compensate accordingly. Now let's listen to how these sounds. I have a single groove that I have isolated, and we're gonna do a without and with, okay? This is the setting that I had on the track. We're gonna listen to it without, and then we're gonna do a pass with OrangeClip. I think it's kind of easy to get what it's doing. The sound just doesn't give up that easily anymore. It's being pushed, it's a little bit of a nudge towards the soundstage, right? It just gets proposed and propelled a little bit further. Now, I didn't dial this in isolation. I didn't find the magic setting just by listening to that groove. I did it in context. So we're gonna do this test again. We're gonna listen to the whole mix, and I'm gonna engage OrangeClip after the first loop. It's subtle, but it's just great. If you want to highlight the groove in the respect of the whole mix and just handle your dynamic range better, and this is just one of the many examples, I just lowered the ceiling a little bit to bite on the extreme peaks, and I gained the output slider a little bit up, and it's just a matter of finding that setting in the orange knob. And once I crossed that minus 14.8, it just sounded appropriate. Now, let's do it again the way it is with a hard knee, and then let's listen to it while I'm moving that slider. Listen to how the sound places itself in different locations. And there's points that you will probably like better than others. This is where you stop, save, and move on. Let's do this test. It's subtle, but it makes all the difference in the world. Here's another place where I've used OrangeClip. This is my bass line playing this part. So it's a pretty tamed atmospheric part, and this is going into a tube compressor and then into an EQ. It's sort of a band pass EQ. Before that tube compressor and the band pass EQ is OrangeClip. And this is the way I've dialed it. I found that it's just a great way to prepare how to propose the sounds to your processors. Now, this one is clipping pretty hard, but it's not a hard knee. So let's try it without and then with. What we're doing here is just proposing a better, more compressed signal to the tube compressor and to the bandpass. The reverbs sound a little bit cooler and more interesting. They're not so unloaded because we're retaining a little bit more of a compression factor into the compressors, into the bandpass, and into the send returns as well. So let's try it in context, starting again without and with. This was just a nudge, and I would describe it like I'm feeling that subwoofer content a little bit more somewhere in the soundstage. It's not about that part being extremely, out there and visible. It's about that gloomy, watery, dark mass. That's how I would describe it. And we can play with it just hear to what extent this could work. Let's try that. You hear it? It's still not jumping outside. And this is a second use case scenario that I really loved OrangeClip on and love most clippers on at the very beginning of the insert chain. Now, why am I pushing +7, +9 in the output gain and I'm not really hearing that sound as much as I would expect? There's a tube compressor afterwards. So the tube compressor is going to compress more, and it's just about the final outcome of it. It's going to be another lead to the sound. So it's just about how much of this bass line is imploding into itself, and it just creates that more stable, pumping, just more coherent or interesting bass section, right? Now, our third use case scenario is very simple. I had a brass bram part, that I wanted at a very specific range. Now, this is crescendos and then decrescendos, right? So the sound just has a very slow envelope, comes up, and the brass just gets very energetic. And it's nice for transitions, for example, just for atmospheric stuff, because then the reverbs, the delays, all the effects kind of feed on them and just develop, right? But because of the slow envelopes, the type of library you're using, and so on and so forth, it's sometimes hard to keep it under control. Then, of course, you do automation. But when you automate these parts that were tracked by real orchestras doing their work, it doesn't always sound natural. So one way I found that might not be natural but sounded great was this. Let's hear the mix in this brass part, and just without OrangeClip, that's the way it sounded. I don't even know if you can hear it. So that's the soloed part. Hear how the delay is building up on things, and it's really nice. But here's what I've done. Just engaged OrangeClip and do you hear it? It's just not like automating. It's not like finding the perfect envelopes. It's the orange knob that once you dial in the right position will kind of soft clip and wave shape its way around. Is it more distorted? Yes, which to me is a bonus because I didn't want the brass to sound perfectly orchestral, but this can be fairly clean if you don't abuse of it. Okay, so here I'm doing 11 dBs of clipping, so obviously it's being pushed a lot, and then I'm compensating with the output trim. Now, I could have done it very lightly, for example, if I wanted to, and then still gain matched with the output slider. It's just a matter of finding that soft clip area, because while the sound is building up, the soft clipping is pushing a little bit down, and it's the right setting that will give you that movement that will not exceed the mix, right? It will not come to the front. I find these extremely useful for orchestral stuff like brass, strings. Granted, I don't write for 100% acoustic virtual orchestra, so this added edge is always welcome in the style of sound that I'm into. But if you're careful with it, OrangeClip can still sound plenty clean. Let's move on to another example. This is a groove I designed in ReDrum. It's got a lot of samples from my Electron stuff, and hear it out without and with in solo. Again, how much of a quantity versus quality do we have? Do you hear it? It's just a little bit more popping in the lows, and it's a little bit probably more defined, but it's fairly stable in the upper mid range, and it's just the lows that are just popping up a little bit better. And I'm getting 4.1 dBs of clipping, or just of over threshold, right? So this would be a lot, but it's not sounding that much, right? So let's hear it in context, without and with again. Granted, it's subtle again, but it makes all the difference in the world. It's placing that groove exactly in the respect of the mix instead of just pushing things upwards or backwards. And it was just a matter of getting the clipping to happen and then dial the orange knob up until you hear it. It goes exactly where you want. So I don't know if any other clipper does it. I have many. I've never quite used them with such a specific soundstage placement purpose. I think OrangeClip sounded fantastic for it. Also, for those of you who know me, when I compose, I am also mixing, retouching the effects, going to the hardware gear, plugins, software effects, pedals. It's all in one, and I'm doing one thing, which is just making the song. I cannot really use processors in software that add a lot of latency because it will just not work for my CPU and also for my real-time playing. OrangeClip hasn't had any issue with minimum or linear phase. So I don't even know which kind of latency it has, so that's good. When I don't know, it means it didn't play against my real-time needs, so that's great. That's another huge point. Now, another subtle example is my machine drum kicks. I wanted them a little bit more stable, a little bit more attitude, and OrangeClip just feeds on electronic drums. Let's try it without and with, and then I'm gonna play with the orange knob. You can hear how it changes aspect. You hear that high hit in terms of energy, the high energy hit. It's just within a realm of the same groove. I don't know how to explain it. So let's try it from 0 going down and up. Have you heard it? There's that magic spot for each track. That -9-ish is really nice. Let's keep going. Nice. What about using it in dry wet? So here I got it pretty loud in the input gain and I'm clipping a lot. Let's see how much and let's hear it. This is 100% wet. You hear that bass note coming out of the kick, right? This would be nice. So I'm gonna link wet and dry and I'm gonna try and find a link spot here. Now, for those of you who've worked on electronic drums a lot, you know that these results, the sound we have in isolation is already gonna be gold in the mix. It's so strong, it's so supportive, but it doesn't go overboard, right? It's strong from its standpoint backwards rather than pushing up. I don't know if that makes any sense. So I've put the output at -12 and we're gonna play the mix and I'm gonna just raise the output trim up and until we make a feature out of these kicks. Let's try that. Now, this is a lot, and I wouldn't do that, and I didn't do that in the song. But you know what? Being excessive sometimes, it plays in your favor. Just because being average and just playing it safe, this isn't playing it safe, and it sounds awesome. It's definitely pushing the subwoofer content out of what the mix bus and everything I've prepared is, because there's obviously staff afterwards that is getting affected by it. But there's an energy that even if you're concentrating on the other elements of the mix, the moment I was bypassing it, it just felt like hollow. Something in the middle of the mix was just lacking, right? And at loud volumes in your monitoring, this is a hitter. This is just, you know, again, it's excessive, but it's just to prove a point. And there you have it. This is a good example of how I've approached OrangeClip and what it's done to my tracks. Now, I've been writing a lot of sketches already, and I can tell you OrangeClip is everywhere. I think it's gonna really define my sound signature for at least these years worth of music. So I hope, as usual, this video has been inspirational, gave you ideas on how wave shaping and clipping can really be more than just destroying a track. It has to do more with designing that soundstage, that environment in which your listeners love to be drawn into, right? And disappear and just get lost. So thank you very much, as usual, for following me. Ciao.